And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as today your Indiana Hoosiers defeat the Minnesota Golden Gophers 72-67 at Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall in a game that the Indiana Hoosiers absolutely had to have, sitting at 18-11, 8-10 in conference play, with Wisconsin coming up this weekend, and the Hoosiers got it. They fell behind 34-32 at the half after a really, really poor stretch of play to end the first half, and I think that had everybody concerned. But the Hoosiers had a great response in the second half, outscoring Minnesota by 7 points to get this win. Indiana now 19-11, 9-10 in conference play, and really sitting in a good position for the NCAA tournament, which we'll talk about as we go through on this edition of the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms. We're going to break it all down for you on this edition, and let's start this show the way we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And for this banner moment, we're going to go to the 5:45 mark of the second half. Indiana leading 60-55, and it had been a second half where, even though Indiana was playing better, they would get out to a lead of 5 or 7 points, and then Minnesota would come right back and get it down to 2, and they would push it out, and Minnesota would come back. It was kind of a theme of the night. But at this point, with Indiana up 5 and really just trying to get some kind of momentum, extend that lead a little bit, two guys combined for a huge three-point play. First, Indiana missed a couple of shots, and Joey Brunk hustled for a couple offensive rebounds to keep the play alive. That was one of the stories of the game was, December Joey Brunk returning, the gritty guy, getting offensive rebounds, scoring in the low post. One of his best performances of the Big Ten season. He was huge. So he, gets these two offensive rebounds, taps one out. Rob goes and gets it in the backcourt. He brings it up, gets it to Al Durham, who drives in with his right hand, gets fouled by Oturu. But again, it was one of those plays where Al was driving to score, not to get fouled. He makes it, knocks down the free throw, and Indiana goes ahead 63-55. I think at that point it was their biggest lead of the second half, and it was a huge play, again, to push that 5-point lead out. And it was two guys combining for the play, really three, because Rob Phinisee had a good game too, which we'll talk about. But Brunk and Al Durham, really turned it on in the second half. They combined for 18 points. Al Durham also had 3 assists. They were aggressive. They were tough. And when Indiana really needed someone else to step up alongside Trayce Jackson-Davis, who had a good game, Al and Joey really brought it. And it was really, really important that they did that. That play was obviously huge, and so we tip our caps to those guys. Really important play in the game. And really, even though Minnesota I think they got it back within 4, that play really extended it to the point where you started to feel a little bit comfortable. Big, big play in the second half. All right, our banner moment, as always, brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel, a company that was founded by an IU grad. They remain based in Indianapolis. Huge supporters of our show, huge supporters of IU athletics, and that's certainly one reason that you should consider checking out homefieldapparel.com. But the most important reason that you should consider checking out Home Field is because their stuff is awesome. Like, as we've been telling you, it's really, really comfortable. And if you're going to wear clothing, you want it to feel good. You want to be able to live in it. You want it to be comfortable, and you want it to stay comfortable even after you wear it a lot. Because if you get a lucky shirt and we get on a run, you've got to keep wearing it, which means I hope that you're still washing it. So I hope those fabrics can hold up, and Home Field Apparel fabrics can. They're comfortable, as comfortable when you get them out of the bag as they are after you've washed them 10, 12 times. So they got that covered. And most importantly, they've got some of the most unique IU logos that you'll find anywhere. So the Bison logo and the old Indiana basketball shoes logo. They just put out this new basketball logo that really looks like a cool kind of like 90s style design that you should check out. I mean, they have over like 30, 35 different IU designs there, football, basketball, whatever your flavor is. Go to homefieldapparel.com, navigate to the Indiana University collection. You will find something for yourself or for the IU fan in your life. And remember that because you're a member of the Assembly Call audience, you get a massive discount when you order at homefieldapparel.com. So use the promo code Assembly20 at checkout. You will get 20% off your entire order. That's Assembly20 for 20% off your order. Go to homefieldapparel.com today. Get the most unique and comfortable IU apparel anywhere. All right, well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team tonight. That is Andy Bottoms. Andy, your Bottoms line on this very important Indiana victory tonight.
Yeah, this was one that IU had to have. It was really a must-win game for them from an NCAA tournament standpoint. I wouldn't say that they're a complete lock at this point. I guess I'll get that part of it out of the way. I think they are inching closer to that, and with the win on Saturday, in my eyes, they definitely would be. But they held serve. They kept themselves in position. I think most people have them on the 9 or the 10 line at this point. I know Lenardi has them as one of the last 4 in, which is a little bit baffling to me. But so I think that from that
he's
standpoint,
not a highly ranked bracketologist.
Well,
So.
there's some would say that but I think it was really important for that reason. It keeps open the possibility that IU might be able to play their way out of the Wednesday of the Big Ten tournament. That is relying on them winning and Purdue losing. I believe at this point, I don't believe there's other or Michigan getting upset by Nebraska and something else happening there. So,
yeah.
Who knows whether those things happen, but at least they, kept that alive potentially. So big win from that perspective and just some moments in the game when they responded well. There were plenty of moments when they didn't respond well and let Minnesota get back in the game. It felt like every time IU would build up a lead, Minnesota would call a timeout and come out and score the next 4 to 6 points and climb right back in it. But IU did down the stretch. You mentioned that play from Al, which was really good. Minnesota then cut it to 4, but 3 straight possessions. Justin makes a couple of free throws. Al has another drive off the same set and curl into the lane that he had before. And Brunk made another nice play in the post. So it was good to see them respond when Minnesota got back close. You did have an answer virtually every time. You'd certainly love to see them not relax in the way that they did multiple times during the course of the game. But at this point with this team, I think you got to focus on the result, and the result was positive and was what this team needed to do. And so you move forward, get ready for Wisconsin. That becomes one you could really remove any doubt about your NCAA tournament fate by coming out and playing well in that game. And I think the effort will have to be execution. I think probably better than tonight. I think the effort for the most part was good. Just sometimes when things got a little lax, controlling dribblers and things like that, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of storylines coming out of this game. Do you realize all 5 Indiana starters were in double figures? Has that happened? Like outside of November, has that happened all season long? Because I'm looking at the box score and you see double digits for all 5 of the guys at the top. And like I feel like my eyes are deceiving me. But that a credit to those guys, and Al was a story, and Joey Brunk was obviously a huge story. Rob Phinisee has 11 points, 5 assists, 6 rebounds. His attacking offense in the first half I thought was really important. Justin Smith was able to get out in transition. There's a lot of storylines in this game. I want to make sure that we don't bury the lead, which is sometimes easy to do and easy to take for granted when you have a great player. Trayce Jackson-Davis was really good tonight, and one of the storylines coming into this game was he's had a foot issue, or an ankle issue. Sprained it in the Purdue game. It hampered him some against Illinois. He didn't practice a lot. Archie Miller sounded a little ominous about it in the pregame with Don Fisher, but Trayce played 31 minutes. I thought you could tell a few times where it seemed to affect him. But for the most part, he was really active. He ran the court. He finished with 18 points, 9 rebounds. He had a couple of steals that were huge. I think both those steals led to buckets, going the other way. And obviously, he had some struggles defensively at times against Oturu, but also had some possessions where he really moved his feet well and really, did some good things defensively. And so, all those other guys contributed. This was a full team win. But Indiana got back to Trayce kind of being the center of the orbit. He led the team in shots with 12. And I thought what was really interesting is Indiana got him the ball a lot more tonight on the move. It wasn't just, Trayce posting up. It was some screen and rolls. It was in transition. It was, there were some cross screens. It was him getting the ball on the move, not just stationary on the block. And that really seemed to help him and kind of get him into a rhythm before he even got the ball. So I thought, especially given the fact that he's playing a little bit injured, he really toughed it out and played a terrific game tonight. 18 points, 9 rebounds. Again, the numbers jump out. They're not as big as what he did at Minnesota, but I thought his role was just as important tonight as it was then.
Yeah, he had a number of those. It was the one play. Al made a really good save on the one end, and Trayce basically ran from the baseline. Rob hit him in stride, as you mentioned, got a layup, I believe, on that. Another dunk off of a roll to the hoop off a pick and roll in the middle. So, I agree with you. I don't know whether that was exactly by design, just in terms of getting him the ball there in that way, as opposed to a straight post up. But it was effective for him, and maybe the foot injury or the ankle injury or whatever the issue is aided by some of that, and not having to go from more of a stationary position in the post. But he was really active. He did a good job on the boards. Oturu had a ton of rebounds regardless. And another area defensively that I thought Trayce did well IU struggled at times with the ball screen defense with Joey hedging out so far, and it really left the other post guy in a position. They gave up a couple baskets in the first half, but really put the other post guy in a position where you had to stay in the lane and be ready to close out to a corner shooter if you needed to, but you had to be there to protect against Oturu getting that. So they didn't really give up as many easy baskets on that as the game wore on. And I thought he was a guy who did a good job playing in the middle there, almost like he was playing the middle of a back line of a 2-3 zone is kind of what he looked like when he would stand in the lane. And then, once the guy got back, he did a good job of closing out.
Yeah, and and the other guy that is definitely worth mentioning here off the top is Rob Phinisee, who I thought his offense early in the game was really important. He was really attacking. And it's something that Ryan and I talked about, on the Illinois postgame show, was how important it is when he's getting into the lane and being aggressive, and that, he can be a good finisher when he does that. And he really did that in the first half. Now, Indiana didn't need him to score as many points in the second half because you had Trayce going, you had Joey going, you had Al going. And so he didn't, get as many shots up in the second half and didn't make his threes tonight. But, 5 assists. He felt more in control tonight, and he played 30 minutes, which I don't know. When's the last time that Rob played 30 minutes? Because I don't feel like that has happened a lot. I'm going to look here real quick. I'm just stalling.
Yeah.
He played 29 against Illinois, but 25, 27, 24, 21, 26. Then you may say, okay, what's the big deal? Like, he played, 30 minutes. That's a few more minutes. Well, I think his minutes going up is a really important deal for Indiana because it tells you two things. Number one, if there are any lingering concerns about conditioning or whatever from the injury, him playing more minutes is a good thing. What I think is more important is it shows that, maybe Archie trusts him a little bit more. Because to me, I think that's why he was struggling to play a lot more minutes in some of those games. But now he's been better, a lot more solid these last couple games. And I think him, playing some more minutes is part of that. But, that attacking was really important. And then in the second half, he had all 5 of his assists came in the second half. So he only scored 4 points in the second half, but he really was more of a facilitator and got the team into the offense. And we saw him running some of those pick and rolls. He had that little, that nice little pocket pass to Joey Brunk. And on the defensive end for Rob Phinisee, Marcus Carr, who obviously is a really important player for Minnesota, he played 37 minutes, only scored 6 points, only got 8 shots up. Did have 5 assists, and there were certainly a couple of times where he beat Rob, off the dribble. But Indiana was really selling out with that ball screen defense. They were not going to let Marcus Carr get going. And so we'll talk about the defense because it was leaky in other areas. But I thought Rob's two-way game tonight, offensively, being that tone setter, getting the team into the offense, especially in the second half, in the first half driving when they needed someone to be aggressive, and then his ability to contain Marcus Carr. This is the guy we talked about in the offseason. Like, this performance from Rob Phinisee was much closer to what we expected to get most of the season. And if Indiana gets this performance from him, they can keep beating teams. So, again, it was a game where a lot of the starters produced, and I thought Rob's performance was really important.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guys that if you take a look at this game and tell yourself a story that they're hitting their stride toward the end of the season, like, I think you can make an argument with Rob based on his play in this game. I think you could say the same about Al and the way that he's played really the last couple games. It would be easy to get yourself. I think it's probably hard to get super optimistic about this team at this point, but you could definitely tell yourself a good story about what's going to come. But I thought what you did. I thought he was aggressive in the first half, smartly aggressive, looking for his own offense and being able to get to the rim, challenging, not being afraid of Oturu at the rim and challenging him. And then in the second half did turn into a bit more of a facilitator, but I thought got them into what they wanted to do, as you mentioned, didn't force things and took good care of the basketball. I think he had 1 turnover in the second half, which I believe was on an offensive foul. They didn't really show a replay of, so I don't know whether I should complain about it or not. But, but I did think, some of those sets where they're getting curls to Al. I think they had another one where they got Justin off of a similar action, got him the ball in the middle of the lane. I thought he put guys in positions where they could score without having to do a whole lot after they got the ball, as opposed to really putting them in a situation where they got to make a spectacular play. It was really setting them up to be successful. And then defensively, as you mentioned, Carr he got by him a couple times in the first half, but I think in the second half, he only ended up with 4 points. I think Race, I want to say, fouled him on the 2 free throws that he got. And then, and then he did make one other shot on a drive to the basket. But generally speaking, I thought Rob held him in check pretty well. And he's a really good guard, a guy who does a lot of what you of what Minnesota needs to get going, and he had 0 assists in the second half. So, credit to, as you said, there were some parts of the defense that were not great, but I do think they did a good job on him. He's really there. Oturu is the focal point in terms of getting him the ball, but the guy who makes it all go was Carr, and I thought Rob was a big part of being able to bottle him up, at least make things difficult for him, make him uncomfortable. We talk about that so much with this team when they can make other teams uncomfortable. I thought they did a good job doing that with Carr tonight.
It's funny sometimes with these games when the last 5-6 minutes are good and you feel good coming out because you got the win, it can lead you to forget some of the negative things that maybe you experienced during the game. And I don't want to totally ignore those things here as we leave this first segment, because this was in a lot of ways just a vintage game for this team. We are, 30 games into the season now, right? 19-11.
Yep.
Look, this team is what they are. They are a team. They are a decent team. You could call them a good team if you wanted to, competing for an NCAA tournament berth, and competing for kind of the minimum standard for success that we set at the beginning of the season. And that's all good, and I'm pleased about it. And I have macro frustrations about the program, but I'm here to live in the moment with this team game by game and celebrate the wins and get frustrated about the losses, all of those things. So there's more good to talk about from this game, but I think the biggest negative storyline coming out of this game is something that we've seen. Like, it is just part of this team's DNA, is they cannot sustain good stretches of play. In the first half, they did what they needed to do. They got out, I think, to an 11-4 lead. Minnesota comes back. They push it out to 25-15. Minnesota comes back. Then Minnesota totally, takes over at the end of the first half. And then, as I talked about off the top, Indiana pushed out some leads early in the second half. Minnesota came back. Like, it was back and forth. And look, Minnesota is not Northwestern or Nebraska. In every predictive metric that you look at, Minnesota, despite their bad record, they're 13-16 now, they have a better efficiency margin than Indiana in Big Ten play, and they're ranked higher in Ken Palm, Bart Torvik, everywhere you look. So they have played better than their record, and they've played a really tough schedule. And I say that because they're a decent team too. These are two decent teams playing each other. It probably should have been a close game, and it was. But I understand the frustration, and I feel the frustration of folks who look at it. And it's like, man, we're up by 10. Let's put our foot on these guys' throats. And Indiana did it at the very end of the game, and I credit them for that. But where I get a little bit frustrated, Andy, is, we are now in year 3 of the Archie Miller era, and this is a program that was supposed to be defensive-oriented and be able to kind of turn on some suffocating D against a decent team at your own place and control games more than it feels like we can control games. So I don't think it's going to change between now and the end of the season. Like, this is just who this team is. And, some of the, Rob playing better and some of the things we saw tonight, that's how this team's going to win games, and they can. But I'm pretty frustrated, overall, that defensively we are not better to be able to control a game like this more as we go through it. And again, it's a sign of a decent team, but I think in a larger sense, it's a sign that the vision that Archie Miller had for this program, it's still not there. And credit to him for being able to win in other ways, but this defense still isn't where it needs to be.
Yeah, there were so many times in this game when it felt like, Minnesota, to me, I give them a lot of credit because they bounced back, played really well on the road at Wisconsin after that just rip your heart out loss to Maryland where they just collapsed on the stretch. And you keep kind of watching this team to, they fall under 500. You just think that they're just going to start packing it in. And they, to their credit, they have not. But this was a game where if you're IU, they come in, they're reeling from all this. Like, you get up 8-10 points and really push that lead up, you can at least put that thought of quitting in their head. And every time IU got the lead, most of my notes are about segments of the game when IU could have pushed the lead further, and instead they let them right back in it. Here's one. First half, would have built the lead to 10. Next 4 possessions, allowed 3 layups and fouled the guy driving to the basket because he'd gotten by him. And the lead just completely goes away. Then even in the second half, you get there, you're up 5. Minnesota takes a timeout. They get a layup. IU turns it over. They get another drive to the basket, cuts the lead to 1. Every time made Richard Pitino look like a genius because every time he would take a timeout, IU would relax and they'd come out and score 4-6 straight points like it was nothing and just drive the ball to the basket. And that's the part that's frustrating. You texted at halftime about I got to get the guy's name. I forget what it is. Enan.
Oh yeah, Enan.
Yeah, Enan, whatever. Like, only shoots 3-pointers the whole year, and you give him 3 wide open looks in the first half. You just, some of that's scouting, some of that is scheme, and you give Minnesota some credit for making IU make decisions to do that. But man, just the lack of attention to detail at times that could really allow you to pull away in the game is frustrating. And in that way, as you said, this game was a just picture perfect look at what this team is, where they can play really well, but the whole game was a roller coaster in terms of the way it ebbed and flowed and who had the lead. And while IU never really fell behind by a substantial amount, they also never really put themselves ahead by a substantial amount. Even you talked about that your banner moment from Al, IU, gets up 8. It's like, can you string together a couple stops, just put the game away? No, you foul immediately on the other end. And IU had some empty possessions there and eventually allowed them to cut the lead back to 4. Just multiple times you could have really put the game away and just didn't do it, whether that's toughness, killer instinct, whatever you want to attribute it to. They just couldn't ever create quite enough separation to really let you breathe easy.
Yeah, and look, I get it. Like, it can be looked as a little bit of a nitpick after you win, but it's just, if you want to know why this Indiana team, again, despite all the good things that have happened this season, why this team is still likely to play on Wednesday in the Big Ten tournament, that's why, and just given the overall frame of what this coach professed that the program would be and still is moving in that direction. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think the overall trajectory is still good, but I think we all expected the defense to be better than this in March of year 3. And so just seeing some of that is frustrating. And that's the thing is, like, there's, at the margins, if Indiana can clean a few of those possessions up, with the way that the offense is starting to function better, because look, the offense was terrible against Purdue. But against Illinois, against Minnesota, we're seeing the offense get more movement. We're seeing Al become, a kind of a more consistent part, a guy who can really use screens. We're seeing Rob step up. Like, you're starting to see some signs of life from the offense. So if the defense can get better, now you're a team that can start stringing together some wins. So it's just, it's from more of a frustration of kind of seeing what the team is capable of at times. And then you see those lapses in focus and those lapses in execution, then it just frustrates you. But, overall, they certainly did enough defensively tonight to win the game, and that's a good thing because it was a game that they absolutely needed to win. But in terms of where this team and this program can keep getting better, that is definitely a place. Anything you want to hit here for a segment before we break and move on?
I'll just talk about Al again. I know you mentioned him. You mentioned that big 3-point play. The key to that play, we harped on this after the Purdue game at IU, was how hard they cut. I mean, he was, for a stretch there where they extended the lead to 8, he was cutting extremely hard and was really, really hard to guard. And for a guy like him, who's not a top shelf athlete, things like that, like, that's the difference between really being able to create separation. And that cut down the lane, I mean, he took one dribble from where he caught it at the elbow and was able to get right to the rim and get fouled, and did the same thing again a couple minutes later. I just thought he just played with a sense of urgency that, given all the stuff we just talked about, at least during that stretch in particular, that I thought was really impressive and something that this team needed. And maybe it shouldn't stand out, but it did. And I just thought he seemed really intent on making plays during that stretch and trying to extend the lead. And, a good second straight game for him, being able to do some of those things. And I just thought that was a key for IU. If they can get him going to be anywhere near what he's been these last couple games on a consistent basis, that really helps alleviate some of the load, gives you a guy that can stretch the floor a little bit and shoot, but also someone who's shown the ability to be able to put it on the floor and move off the ball. So I thought that stretch from him was really key there.
Absolutely. All right, coming up as we continue our breakdown of Indiana's victory over Minnesota, I will point out tonight's meaningful moments that you might have missed. Andy will as well. And then we will go inside the numbers to highlight some of the most important statistical notes from this game. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
Hey, this is Max Bielfeldt, Big Ten champ and better than advertised Sixth Man of the Year in 2016. And speaking of better than advertised, join Jerod, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the Assembly Call, after every IU basketball game. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, Max. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms, and we are breaking down Indiana's 5-point victory over Minnesota tonight at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. Andy, time to point out a few meaningful moments that you might have missed, and we might have mentioned this play earlier, but I thought it was really, really important early in the second half. 17:02 mark. Again, Indiana really struggling there at the end of the first half. I talked on the halftime report about how this, a game like this is about mentality. Against a team like Minnesota, you got to come out with that mentality to just beat them on your home court. And Indiana had it at the beginning of the game. They didn't have it at the end of the first half, but they really brought it to start the second half, which was extremely encouraging to see. And obviously the guys who started and Archie deserve a lot of credit for that. But, it's 35-34. Trayce made a great defensive play deflecting a pass. And, again, he's going to get lost, a few times on defense as a freshman will. And you saw him struggling a few times to move, but I thought he was really alert tonight and his hands were alert and he got his hands on some passes. And Al made a great hustle play to save the ball from going out of bounds. He gets it to Rob. And then what was really impressive about that play was how Trayce ran the floor and was, going down the right wing. Rob found him. He gets a layup, 37-34. On the next possession then, Joey Brunk gets a great block on Daniel Oturu. That is not a sentence that I expected to say tonight, but he did. And then Al comes down and drains a three, and it's 40-34. And right there, those were Indiana's four best players tonight. Rob, Al, Joey, Trayce, and they were all active and alert and ready to make plays. And, that was huge. Now, Minnesota would come back. I think they even got a lead at one point, 52-51 or 53-52. So it's not like that put it away. But I thought that quick stretch at the start of the second half kind of reestablished control for Indiana after teetering there at the end of the first half. And, for a team that we know can struggle with their mentality a little bit, they showed, I thought, some grit and a good mentality coming out in the second half to kind of reestablish that. As we said, Minnesota would come back, Indiana would have to push it back out again. But that particular stretch was really nice to see at the start of the second half. And then, the other ones that I was going to mention, Andy, or a lot of the ones that you mentioned at the end of the first half, in the second half when it was 65-60, you saw Al just running all over the court. And I think, this is the one you were talking about. You're really seeing a lot more of Indiana screening for Al. This is something that we talked about a month ago. He's a guy who can make shots and he can make plays when he can get going downhill. And Indiana's really putting him in positions, to read screens. And you're seeing him at times fade out to the three-point line. He'll get a shot or he'll curl in. And when he does that, he'll either draw the defense, and we saw once he was able to dump it down to either Trayce or Joey, who was cutting down the left side, and other times he'll just drive right to the basket. Like, he is a guy, when he plays aggressively, can put a lot of pressure on the defense. And on that particular play, he faded on one, didn't have a shot, goes right back to it, curls on the next one, knifes into the lane for a layup, 67-60. That was another big spot where Indiana had a 5-point lead. They pushed it out. And, to me, tonight was a tale of two halves for Al Durham in terms of his mentality. He was passive in the first half. In the second half, he came out to attack. That led to assists. That led to points. When Indiana gets that Al Durham, they can be a decent offense. They really can be when they get that guy who can be that kind of inside and driving threat. And we're seeing them really commit more to getting him in spots where he can be successful with the basketball, which is nice because for about 6 weeks there, it felt like Indiana was pretty one-dimensional, just trying to get it into Trayce and kind of running actions for the big guys. It's nice to see them really working to get the guards in a position more to get some shots. So those plays really stood out to me in the second half. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I would agree. And some of those sets where they're trying to get guys the ball at the elbow going downhill toward the basket really – it's not different in the sense that IU still trying to get the ball in the paint, get the ball inside, but it's different in terms of the way that they're approaching it. And those were successful. We mentioned a couple of plays with Al. I believe that Justin had one off of a similar action as well. We talked about for me, a couple that happened in the first half. I thought Armaan Franklin did some things that were not great at times, but I thought he did a really good job of pushing the ball up the floor. He got a rebound, pushed it up, got it to Devontae for a three early that pushed the lead up to 8. He had another rebound where I think he pushed the ball up the floor as well. He didn't get the assist, but might have had the hockey assist where he really was really pushing the ball. So I thought he brought some good spark. The rotation really tightened up in the second half. The starters really played the vast majority of the minutes. You got a little bit of Devontae, a little bit of of Justin and a little bit of Race, but it was pretty tight rotation in the second half. But I thought Armand had some decent moments there where he at least doing the things that Archie really wants him to do. And Justin, another guy we haven't talked about a ton, had a decent stretch at one point in the second half where Minnesota had cut the lead to 1. Justin scored 4 straight for IU, one on a kind of a duck in where he got a jump hook, which he's struggled with over the course of the season, but made that one, and then got a dunk out in transition after a turnover where Al made a really nice pass ahead to him. So kind of a good 4-point stretch there. He was kind of up and down as well. I felt like over the course of the game, lost shooters at times, fouled Kalsher on the 3-pointer late, but also made those clutch free throws, had that stretch that I talked about. It was just kind of, similar to, I'd say the similar things about him that I would about the rest of the team, where it was just really up and down, where he would gamble for steals at times that led to a 3 and, then come back and make a decent play on the offensive end. So kind of up and down performance from him, but that stretch was kind of important just in terms of having a response when Minnesota cut the lead to 1.
One guy that I want to talk about is Devontae Green, who, I actually thought played a pretty decent first half. He had 5 points. He had 3 assists. I thought he was patient. He only took 4 shots. I thought they were all pretty good shots, if I remember correctly, but he had a nice 5-point stretch where he made a 3. He hit a layup. He was moving. And then I thought in the second half, his play really dropped off. And, not just because he had a quick trigger on a few threes. Like, Devontae needs to do that, and this team needs him to take some of those shots. So I'm not as disappointed with that. But I did think, he does have to have some modicum of discretion, and one of those threes was a little bit contested, was too quick. This is actually when it was 52-51. He misses it, and this was after one of Trayce Jackson-Davis' steals, and then goes down on the other end and gets driven on. Really just put up matador defense. And those are the kinds of plays that frustrate you with Devontae, when, a poor offensive play on one end leads to lackadaisical defense on the other end. And, he only got 8 minutes in the second half. What did he play in the first half? He played 10 minutes in the second half. So, you look at, why did Rob get a few of those extra minutes in the second half? Those minutes came from where Devontae usually gets them. And I thought it was good of Archie to not play him as much because he just didn't seem quite as good there in the second half. And so, you can't have those plays from him on defense, where he just basically gives up a possession, because that's a big swing right there. So, we know that we're going to live and die with some of the shooting from him. And, some nights he's going to make all these shots and some nights he's not. Tonight, 8 points, 3 for 8. But that stretch from me or from him disappointed me a little bit. And this is probably, one of the least effective games he's had, I thought, in the last few overall, despite his strong start in the first half. And so hopefully, come out on Saturday against Wisconsin and certainly in the Big Ten tournament, going to need more from him. But, when you get this kind of scoring from Al Durham, when you get this kind of scoring from Joey Brunk, you can absorb Devontae Green not being in double figures and still win. So it at least his struggles at least came on a good night when other guys were there to pick up the scoring slack.
Yeah, the stretch you mentioned was, I don't know, about the midway point of maybe around the midway point of the second half. Yeah, there was a 10 possession stretch where he turned the ball over once, did make a nice driving layup, but missed 3 3-pointers. I mean, that's just didn't, and I actually felt like in the second half of some of the other games that he'd been a little bit more under control, where it was almost like he would come out in the first half, take a number of shots, see how he was doing. But I felt like he showed some restraint in the second half at times to try to make plays for other guys and not really force things. Tonight felt a little bit like the opposite, because I'd agree with you. I thought the first half there were, some plays that were not ideal, but it was generally restrained. And then the second half was just reckless at one stretch. So that stretch with him was an odd one. But yeah, I think Archie took him out at that point, really didn't put him back in till the end. He missed free throws at the end, was 1 of 3 down the stretch. Didn't really matter because IU had built up enough of a lead, but he's a guy that you want to be able to have on the floor at the end of games to make free throws, and just seemed like focus or whatever else the case may be was not really where it needed to be with him tonight.
Yeah, and then the other moment that obviously stood out was, I don't remember exactly what the score was. You'll recall, though, when Justin tried to get the steal out at the top of the key, didn't get it, and the guy goes and makes a three. I think we might have been up by 7 at that point. It was like 44-37, something like that, and the guy makes a three, and that led to a little bit of a run. It's one of those plays. It was really good hustle. It was a good idea, but he didn't complete it. That left the guy wide open for a three. I thought it was a mixed bag from Justin defensively. Like, he's always going to have some good possessions defensively because he's strong, he's mobile, and when he's there and really engaged, he's going to be good. But I thought some of those threes in the first half were just some lackadaisical awareness closeouts from him. And so, he got out in transition again and did some good things tonight. But a little bit of a mixed bag. Like, I thought defensively, whereas I thought some other guys really played, some of the better defense we've seen from them recently, I didn't get that same from Justin Smith, and I think he'll need to be better against Wisconsin if we're going to beat them.
Yeah, I mean, you look at I referenced a couple of those same plays that you did in terms of moments, but he did, second half he had 6 points, but he didn't have any rebounds, and did have one steal. I think they just need more activity from him on that end. I thought what he did offensively was fine.
His shot selection was good. Like, he took that 1-3 that maybe you don't want him to take, but I mean,
yeah,
I'll give him one of those a game, if he's gonna be left open. So
yeah, otherwise I thought he did a good job. The free throws he made were off of, he didn't settle for a jumper. He drove to the basket, got fouled. Thought he did some nice things offensively. I think you can live with a performance like this from him offensively. I think defensively, though, you've just seen that he's capable. Again, I would put him in the same category as his team. Like, you've seen what they're capable of, and when you don't see that on a consistent basis, even within games, it's frustrating. I think that's kind of where you sit with him, because what he's capable of defensively. And like you said, Wisconsin will test them even more. I thought there were times that they missed cutters. There was a play, Devontae totally lost his guy. They had a backdoor cut, and they just missed it, didn't look, didn't see it. But it was a layup if they make the pass. So I just thought there were times that IU relaxed. Containing dribblers was a challenge, as we've talked about for the majority of the Big Ten season at this point. And Justin, I think, is a guy who's capable of doing more on that end of the court, or at least doing more and more consistently.
And to be fair, Kent mentions in the chat, one of the turning points with 9:50 to go in the second half, IU down 1. Justin, makes a tip, gets a steal. He ended up missing the layup, but then Rob hustled down and got that offensive rebound and scored, which was a big play. And look, Justin can do that. Getting 2 steals is big. It feels like he has the capability to do that every game when he's really active. And again, he tried to get one, going for that play at the top of the key. I don't fault him for the effort on a play like that, but I just think it's the consistency that you want to see a little bit more from him. Let's talk about some numbers, Andy. Big focuses coming into the game. One of them for Archie Miller was rebounding. And overall, Indiana out-rebounds Minnesota by 1, 35-34. And I thought they really did a nice job on the glass early in the game. I thought that faded some as the game went on. They gave up 10 offensive rebounds. A few, Daniel Otura had 7 offensive rebounds. Some of those were him just getting his own shot back. But they're a pretty good rebounding team. And so, if you're going to battle them to a draw on the rebounds, that's fine. I think what was most important for Indiana is that they only turned the ball over 10 times, which was really, really important. And so Minnesota, they got points off turnovers. They did have 13 points off turnovers, so they actually converted those into a good amount of points. But only 10 turnovers for Indiana is a good amount. And Indiana had 14 assists on the night, which is a good number for this Indiana crew. But the other number that jumps out to me, and this kind of hints at, it was good performance. The second half defense was better. Minnesota helped out with that some. They were 16 for 29 on layups. They were 8 of 14 on free throws. So you throw that exact same defensive performance out there, but Oturu makes that one dunk. They make a couple of free throws. You're looking at this game a little bit differently. And so that's the only point I wanted to make about the defense, is some of that leakiness, which I think we all thought would be a little bit tighter at this point in the season. It's there. Now, again, part of the reason a team misses layups is because you're challenging shots and you're playing hard and you're hustling. And so you give Indiana credit for some of that. But certainly Minnesota had some unforced errors that you can see right there in the numbers offensively that hurt. And to be fair, Indiana only made 9 of their 17 free throws, so they could have extended the lead out if they had done a little bit more of that. But those are the numbers that jump out to me. What jumps out to you, Andy?
Yeah, you talked about the free throws. IU did not shoot the three well. They were 3 of 15 from three, but they shot 61% on two. So they were 27 of 44 on 2-point shots. So that was good. The rebounds you mentioned, Minnesota had, I think, 3 offensive rebounds in the first half, 7 in the second half. I do think a decent amount of that was Oturu missing shots and getting them back on his own. But really, I was surprised the final rebounding margin was as close as it was, because IU really dominated that, particularly early on. IU gets 52 points in the paint. Again, kind of getting back to what they want to do. A lot of that is defense. If you look at the way Purdue defended IU and how physical they were, and all those kinds of things, it made it hard to get the ball where IU wanted to. But IU was able to get the ball into the lane either through post ups, through those curls that we talked about, through just drives from Rob that we mentioned. So that was really important. Just getting back to that. As you go there, those are really the big ones. The free throw shooting was a struggle. You had Joey miss all 3 of his. Devontae missed a couple at the end. Rob missed 2 out of 3, getting fouled on a 3-pointer. So some of those things are a little frustrating. But turnovers, they really took care of the ball better in the second half. Minnesota with 8 turnovers in the second half. IU with just 3. So that really flipped from what it was in the first half, when IU just had some. I think almost every turnover that I can remember in the first half was careless. You had the 5-second call. You had nearly had another one in the second half doing the same thing. Just thought they were just smarter because when they would run their offense, they were getting good shots for the, by and large, as evidenced by that 2-point shooting percentage.
Yeah. The last number that I want to talk about is 13, and that's the number of minutes that Trayce Thompson played today. He was also minus 13 when he was on the court. And we always talk about the limitations of plus minus in an individual game setting, but Trayce is a guy that has typically been very positive in that stat recently. And I thought that stat was, I don't think he was that bad, but I thought it was relatively accurate in terms of him struggling with his minutes. And one of the things that we saw when Trayce was really impactful for that stretch of games, from the Iowa game, the first Minnesota game, the Penn State game, he's a guy that was getting blocks and steals. He had 6 combined against Iowa. He had 2 combined against Minnesota, 2 combined against Penn State, 4 combined against Purdue. The last 2 games, he's had 1 steal in each game. So you're seeing a bit less of the disruption from Trayce, and I don't know if he's dealing with any kind of injury or whatever. Just it seems like he's a little less active. I thought today he was a little bit less adept at stopping dribblers. That's something that we really saw him do a good job of. Just being able to challenge guys who were driving him with his body. Today he got driven by a lot. And he seems to be forcing his offense a little bit more. Now, it's only fair to say, he was lauded in the Penn State game for making some really nice post moves. And you want to see him step out, expand his game, start to feel more comfortable out there. And as a young guy does that, you're going to deal with some ups and downs. This is a game where it felt like there were a couple of possessions. There was a stretch in the second half, a really important stretch. I don't remember exactly when it came. But we had struggled a little bit offensively, and then 2 straight possessions, ended up with Trayce getting the ball in the post and not really getting a good shot up. And when you had some other guys going, it felt like the offense probably should be run through, a different guy at that point in time. But, again, ups and downs from a guy. He's still a really important part of this team. But this was a game where he was not as impactful. But, again, you had a guy like Joey Brunk picking up slack with that activity, getting some of those rebounds, getting that block shot on Oturu that might have been Trayce Thompson in another game. So that's what good teams do, is when some guys struggle, other guys step up. And so Trayce has been such an important part of this team winning games down the stretch. This was not a very impactful game for him, but, other guys stepped up, and that was a good thing to see.
Yeah, he got a couple fouls again. I think that was a big issue in the Illinois game for him. And I would agree. I don't think he was as poor as the plus minus would indicate.
No, I agree.
But it did. Were a couple times that I think it was actually after. I don't know if this is the stretch you were mentioning, but it was after Al made that and 1 to push it to 8. I think it was Trayce who actually fouled on the other end and then came down and he took shots on the next 2 possessions. That may or may not be.
It's when it was 63 to 59.
Yeah. So he gives up the 2 free throws, comes back, takes a difficult shot inside where he wasn't really able to, make back the guy down. He ended up falling away on one of the shots, and then the other was a little bit closer, but kind of struggled. And just, he wasn't the guy who had it going at that point. And but he's going to continue to be important in a game like tonight, where I think they try to get Trayce a little bit of extra rest with the the foot injury, and I think even early in the game, Trayce got a foul relatively quickly. So I don't know if that was part rest because of the injury or part I don't want him to get a second foul, but he sat for a decent amount at that stage of the game, and Trayce was able to come in and do some things. So I think he becomes. This was in some ways a good matchup for Brunk, and that played itself out, despite the fact that, how he had played coming into the game. But I think you could at least look at this and say, hey, maybe there's something to be said for, depending upon who he's matched up with, he can do some things in the post. I think the Wisconsin game is potentially the opposite, just in terms of what they like to do and playing their big guys on the outside. I think Joey had a real struggle with Nate Reavers. That game has been forever ago, obviously, but you could easily see that being a game where Trayce can really be impactful. He was impactful in the Wisconsin game last year, as we all remember, and so could just be a matchup thing and bounce back. And I think if you can get a good combined performance from he and Joey, you're going to feel pretty good about it. It doesn't necessarily matter where the balance of those points comes from, but if you combine can get a good showing as a second big inside, then you're going to feel pretty good. And tonight you get 2 from Trayce and 12 from Joey, and you're going to take 14 points out of that position anytime you can get it. So
absolutely,
overall in the aggregate, just view them as one potentially, and then whatever you get out of that, those two guys combined, then that's going to tell a good story for how this team's going to play going forward.
Yeah, well said. All right, coming up on the Assembly Call, we are going to hand out our game balls. So many options to choose from tonight. Then we will hit a few other lingering storylines, and then we will look ahead to Indiana's next opponent, that big game against Wisconsin on Saturday. And it's time for Last Call. That's next here on the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
Ethan Happ, and I never listen to the Assembly Call, especially the episodes that Ryan is on.
Well, hey, glad you're listening tonight, Ethan. And you're listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. You can catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, plus every Thursday night at our website, assemblycall.com. While you are there, make sure that you sign up for our free IU Hoops email newsletter. Over 7,000 of your fellow IU fans have subscribed. You can text IU also to 66866 to subscribe to the newsletter. That is IU to 66866. All right, I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms. We are breaking down Indiana's very, very important 5-point victory over Minnesota tonight to push the Hoosiers to 19 victories on the season. Really help them, feel secure a current position in the NCAA tournament. I guess, if you're looking, that's probably the way to say it, is you're looking on March 4th and you're looking at the majority of the brackets, you're going to see Indiana in there. You can feel good about that. But obviously, Selection Sunday isn't for a while, so there's still work to do, and it's going to depend on what other teams do around Indiana. But this was a very, very important win to feel good about where they sit to just make the tournament. And so it's very important that Indiana got that. Andy, let's hand out some game balls. A lot of options tonight. I really feel like there's 4 ways you could go, and you could make a reasonable argument for all 4 guys. So who are you going to go?
I would agree. That's a good problem to have. There have been other times when we've had far fewer.
It's a great problem to have.
Legitimate options to do that. So I would be absolutely fine if, as we move forward, that's how it would go. I'll give mine to Joey Brunk. I just thought it was kind of an out of nowhere performance, and maybe I'm giving extra credit for being happy to see him get back into playing the way that he was when he was really impactful earlier in the season. But I thought he just made a lot of baskets at crucial times. You mentioned that block on Oturu. That was a big one. I just thought there were stretches of the game where he was as impactful as he's been at any point during the season, which was at this point, based on how he'd played over the last month, completely unexpected in my eyes and the eyes of many. If you look at things from a plus minus standpoint, he was plus 17, which is as good as anybody, plus 17 in 28 minutes. Didn't miss the 3 free throws, but came up with 8 rebounds. Had a 1 or 2 big ones on that play that Al eventually got fouled on, where he was able to keep the ball alive. So I just thought maybe I don't know if I'd say sentimental pick at this point, but definitely one that I thought was out of nowhere, a pleasant surprise and well-deserved game ball. Archie made some comments after the game, just kind of talked about that he's really a thinker and might have been thinking too much about what he was doing, how he was playing, and seemed to just go out and play tonight. There was a play early in the game when he really avoided contact, missed a shot on a good post up, and he seemed to, even within the game, bounce back from that and took the ball stronger to the basket and benefited from that as he went. So I'll give mine to Joey. Like you said, I think you could pick any of four guys and you'd get no argument whatsoever from me.
Well, the chat mob is definitely going with Joey Brunk. There's no question about it. Almost unanimous, which is somewhat surprising. And Joey Brunk is a great choice for all the reasons that you just said, Andy. It is grading on a curve a little bit. And I think his production was a lot more in the second half than it was in the first half. But I thought he was really good. Al was obviously very important. They were the guys I chose for the banner moment for a reason. But, to me, I think the two guys that are actually at the top of the list for the game balls are Trayce and Rob, because I thought Trayce and Rob were the guys who brought it both halves. And even though Indiana's first half was forgettable, at least in terms of the last 8 minutes, the first 12 minutes of how they played was important. And I thought Trayce and Rob really got them off to a good start. And so to me, those are the two guys that I would pick. And I'm going to go with Trayce. And I know it's a little bit of a cop-out. I get it, to go with the best player and the guy who's always scoring the points. But given the fact that he's been battling through an injury and to play as many minutes as he did and to play hard, this wasn't just Trayce going out there and out-talenting people. He played hard tonight. He ran the floor. And so, as much as Joey did that, Trayce was right there doing it too. And even more important for me, we came on here after the Illinois game. We criticized him. We criticized the coaching staff for him only having 9 shots. Tonight he had 12 shots. He made 8 of them. And you might say, well, is that big of a difference? The difference between 9 and 12 shots? I think if Trayce finds a way to get 12 shots in the Illinois game, we win that game. That's how important I think it is that he be that focal point of the offense. And it was great that they did some different things to get him the ball, that he, was hustling in transition opportunities to get scores. So, he is so important to what this team does. And I don't want to take it for granted just because he's that talented. But I thought from opening tip to the end of the game, he didn't need to improve and play better in the second half. He brought it in the second half just like he did in the first half. And that rock of production is so important for a team that kind of struggles with it. So I thumbs up everybody who said Brunk. I get it if you want to say Al Durham. But to me, Rob and Trayce were the two most important guys for what they did in both halves, and Trayce is the guy that I'm going to go with for the game ball. That said, the chat mob gets to break ties, and so it'll go to Joey Brunk because the chat mob agreed with you, Andy. So I wanted to get my vote in there for Trayce.
No, I think that's totally fair. I probably would have, my second choice would have been Rob. Did a little bit of everything, as we said, was aggressive offensively in the first half, and was a bit more of a playmaker, facilitator in the second. But 8 points, or 5 assists, 6 rebounds, and 10 points, I believe, 11 points. Sorry, just thought it was a really solid game from him. And if you spin it forward to, if you can get consistent performances like that from Rob, it goes a long way toward this team playing well. Because I thought he did a lot of the things that, like you said earlier in the show, that this was more like what we expected from him, but less like what we've actually gotten for the most part. So I thought it was a solid performance from him. So he would have been my second choice. But yeah, nothing wrong with Trayce. Ken Palm agrees with you for what it's worth. He was the game MVP because he had a 140 offensive rating, which is rather good.
Man, I need to go add it up. He's got a lot of those now. He may be challenging Cody Zeller for freshman year Ken Palm MVP awards. I'm gonna have to go. I'll go look for that. We'll do some research.
He's at 11 right now. If I did the quick math here, so
that's pretty darn good. The only other things that we really haven't talked about, it was a forgettable night for the bench. We talked about Race, we talked about Devontae, Jerome and Duran did not really do much of anything when they got in there. Jerome had a turnover right when he got in the first half. Archie immediately yanked him. He played a little more in the second half, but didn't know what he was supposed to do on a big possession down the stretch. So he had nothing but a couple of turnovers. So not the kind of game you want from Jerome, and Duran just really wasn't able to get going there in the first half. I did think Armand had some nice minutes in the first half. He was aggressive, got the ball out in transition, got some rebounds. We didn't see him in the second half, which has kind of become the thing. The only other...
Duran did teach us that you can have another human jump up and land on your back and not be called for a foul. So yeah, You cannot say he taught us nothing or we learned nothing from him over the course of the game. But yeah, it was a relatively forgettable game from the bench guys for sure.
And the only other thing, I think from a decision-making perspective, we've seen at the end of a lot of first halves, Archie sitting Rob, again, whether that's for rest, whether that's because he just wants to play the other guys for whatever reason. But, he was sitting I think he sat for the final couple minutes of the first half when Indiana lost their lead. And that's one of those questions, given how Rob was playing in this game, you wonder, is that a scripted thing? Because we've seen it. That's of all the kind of decisions and lineup decisions, that's the one stretch where it's like, boy, you'd kind of like to see how the rest of that would have played out with Rob out there because he was such a steady hand tonight. So that's really my only kind of nitpick from a game flow, lineup, type question. But something that we've kind of seen, and in other halves it hasn't been something that has seemed like it's maybe made the biggest deal because Rob hasn't been playing as well. But today he was. So
yeah, it looked like he went out at the 125 mark if the substitutions in the box score are right.
All right, so maybe it wasn't even as much time as I thought.
Yeah, I don't know that it was, but I think almost every possession down the stretch, Minnesota scored. I think it was 11-3 in that last segment of the half, if I remember correctly. Going into the locker room. So I think that's fair. I think the only other substitution I talked a little bit earlier about Trayce, maybe not really understanding for sure why he went out as early as he did in the first half. Was a bit earlier than usual, it felt like, but again, I don't know whether that was injury related or didn't want him to get a second foul. I'm not really sure about that, but yeah, I thought generally the rotations made more sense. We talked about it tightening up a lot in the second half. Really, the starters played. I think all the starters played at least 16 minutes in the second half, I want to say.
Yeah.
And I think that was warranted based on how they had played over the rest of the game. So I thought that part, once it got to crunch time, things had sorted themselves out pretty well, and the coaches rode with the guys who had played the best over the course of the game.
Always important to mention, too, that we have 20% of the information that these decisions are based on because we don't see guys practice. We don't know what injuries.
That could be high, but it's fair.
Yeah. So, I mean, we fully acknowledge that as we question these decisions. We understand that. So we have kind of some breaking news here on the postgame show. This is usually something that's only done on Thursdays, but we actually have a mediocre question for the postgame show.
Oh boy.
It's not that good,
that's right.
But it's not that bad. It's Jay's mediocre question.
Jay was lambasting me in the chat for not going over to Twitter and checking out this mediocre question. I guess he didn't think that I had anything going on here at the moment, but he did do a nice job.
You don't have your notifications turned on your phone for any time that he tweets at the account? That does feel like it's on you now that we mention it.
Yeah, he put it in the chat for us. It is a mediocre question, so we'll get to it. He says, has Indiana turned a corner in terms of consistent effort? 5 good games in a row. Assuming that's the case, how many more wins does IU get this season? I think it's pretty easy to answer that question in the affirmative. And I think it's easy to do so because we saw it for 2 road games. That's what, you expect it for. No, 3 road games actually, because the Minnesota game was a road game. So, that Michigan game was very forgettable, but they played much better and beat Minnesota by 12. They come home, beat Penn State by 8. Obviously, the Purdue game was a horrible offensive performance, but they played well defensively. They play hard. Illinois, so I think this is probably the best 5-game stretch they've had of just really consistently. And to me, again, it's not as much effort. I think effort is a byproduct of their buy-in with what they're doing. So that's what I think we're seeing a little bit more, is a team that's on the same page, more connected with the coach, more connected with what they're doing. And so when things go bad, when they have these bad stretches like we talk about today, it's a positive that they're not lasting so much longer. The offensive droughts aren't lasting so much longer. The runs by the other team aren't lasting so much longer because it feels like they have more of a rudder. They have more of a foundation to fall back on. So I say yes, and I'll turn it over to you. I'm assuming that you agree, and if that's the case, what do you see kind of down the stretch for what this team is capable of?
Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at some of the efficiency numbers over that stretch of games that you're talking about, and if you look from a defensive standpoint, which is, I think, really where with this team the effort has shown up for the most part. I just don't know that this team's good enough offensively to really hang your hat on a whole lot that you draw from those numbers. But if you look at that first Minnesota game, at least on the way it is on KenPom, if you got 0.83, points per possession. Penn State 0.86, Purdue 0.88. I will not read to everyone what the offensive number was in that. Illinois 1.06. They've got some talented guys, even though they don't tend to be super efficient offensively. And tonight, 0.99. So if you look at it that way, that's 4 out of those 5 games that you've held the other team under a point per possession, which for this team, the way this team plays offensively, they're not going to be able to survive too many games when they give up more than a point per possession. That's just the reality of the limitations of what this team can do offensively. But I do think that, to me, is the best place to look at it, because when this team has just rolled over, that has manifested itself by the other team just lighting them up and scoring at will over the course of the game. So I do think that's positive. The second part of the question is a little bit dependent upon what happens in the seeding of the Big Ten tournament. If IU does end up the 11 seed, you would presumably play Nebraska unless they get another win, since Northwestern swept them over the course of the season. I think that you'd have to feel like that's a win, although with IU's checkered Big Ten tournament history, nothing can be taken for granted there. I think they're playing well enough to be able to challenge Wisconsin at home. But again, to predict a whole bunch of wins for this team in the Big Ten tournament without really having a great handle on who they would play next in those scenarios because of how clustered the teams are, I think you'd feel good if they could win a couple more games one way or another. Even if they lost to Wisconsin 1-2 games in the Big Ten tournament, I think you'd feel pretty good if you beat Wisconsin. Maybe you stay out of the Wednesday games and give yourself a chance there. I guess I'll say 2 to answer that question, but it's a little bit tough to gauge without seeing the draw yet.
Yeah, I mean, again, for that to happen, Indiana not only has to beat Wisconsin, but Purdue has to lose at home to Rutgers, which, it is very likely that Indiana's going to play.
Noted great road team, Rutgers, yes. That is.
Yeah.
They're due on the road, some would say.
We'll talk about this more tomorrow night. Like, there's no positive, like, bracketology thing, right, for playing in the Wednesday game? Like, it's basically, you're not going to get any credit for it.
Yeah, you really don't get credit. It's not, if one of those teams was good enough to make that a quad 2 win, you could maybe talk yourself into getting a little bit of credit for it because it's a neutral court game, but the other team's got to be in the top 100 in the net for it to be a quad 2 game. So yeah, to me, there's really no there's no benefit from a seeding standpoint. Yes, it's racking up another win. I don't know that is a huge factor at this point for this team, given what they've done. It does give them another neutral court, win today. They've got 4 road neutrals between those, so in that regard could be a little bit important. And the other thing, this team is not going to run through the Big Ten tournament and win 5 games in 5 days or whatever it would be in order to do that. But you do see in some cases, this is me trying to be way overly optimistic, where some of the teams that play earlier, they can get into a little bit of a rhythm and may be able to be playing well on that second day or third game because you've gotten into a little bit of rhythm versus, playing somebody who's been sitting around and hasn't done that. So maybe it gives you something there that propels you to play well in the Thursday game, but feel like I'm grasping a little bit there, but there's definitely, from a short answer bracketology perspective, absolutely nothing to be gained, only something to be lost in that scenario.
It's always funny and sad seeing IU fans try to conjure up reasons for optimism for the Big Ten tournament. Look, one of these years, good things are going to happen in the Big Ten tournament,
I mean, what better way to finish a really inconsistent season than to finish by playing Wisconsin and then heading to the Big Ten tournament? Multiple layers of hell for IU fans. So it
is fair to say, as Jay says, I would rather play Nebraska and then Iowa than start with Michigan, and that's fair. Like, that path could be better. Look, we will take what comes. Let's go. Hopefully, we're already at 20 wins when it gets there because we beat Wisconsin at home. Do you realize that this was the first game in 13 that was not a Tier A game, according to Ken Palm? 12 straight Tier A games for Indiana. And this was a Tier B game because Minnesota's ranked 33rd. We're still below them in Ken Palm. Minnesota is 13-16. We're 19-11. We're below them in Ken Palm. Whatever. There's a funny comment in the chat. 85 Jeff says if the 95 Bulls put on IU uniforms, they would probably lose to the 2020 Huskers in the Big Ten tournament. These are the kinds of statements that IU fans make about the Big Ten tournament. We all
that's
feel
the type of confidence
that is why one of these years we're going to make an expected run in the Big Ten tournament, and it's going to be awesome. So, but to just put a little bow on that question, whatever, the Big Ten tournament, something's going to happen in the Big Ten tournament. We'll wait to see it. I do feel a lot better about this team's ability to do something in the NCAA tournament now. Like winning this game tonight was important. Like I tweeted, like, if this team is a serious NCAA tournament team, not just one that's going to like back into the NCAA tournament, this is a game you win. And they did it. They took care of business. And, for all the flaws about this team, Andy, maybe the best thing that you can say about them, because it gets said all the time, they have no bad losses, right? Which, is always kind of a weird statement, because we certainly have some losses where we've been really bad, but we have no losses to bad teams. But that matters. This team has taken care of business and won the games that they should win. They did it in December when they're playing Notre Dame and Connecticut on neutral court wins, and those aren't that impressive, but they took care of business, because if you lose those games, your resume looks so much different. So they've kind of been on the razor's edge, but when they've had to win and when they've had games that they've been supposed to win, they've done it. And there is something to be said for that. So for all the imperfections that this team has, that's impressive. And they're at 19 wins, and they're in a really good spot. And now the fact that they are playing more consistently, the fact that the offense, these last couple games looks a little better, and you're getting Al, kind of going some, and it feels like you're a little more multi-dimensional, that's good. So I certainly feel a lot better about it now than I did coming out of that Michigan game. And it's a credit to the coaches, and it's a credit to the guys for coming together, believing in what they're doing, and minimizing the spurts of bad play. I don't think this team will ever totally get rid of them, but they're minimizing them. They're shortening those droughts. And, it's leading to more successful performances overall, better 40 minutes. And sometimes they win at the end, sometimes they don't, but they're putting better, more coherent 40 minutes of basketball out there consistently. And that's good. They're probably playing their most consistent basketball coming down the stretch at the end of the season, and that's what you want to be doing. So,
yeah, it's funny that you look at it and you think about last season, how they started to get things together a little bit more toward the end of the season, and I think the common refrain from other fans who are seeing it less positively, or just who are more frustrated by things, as we all have been at times, is like, why does it take so long for everything to get figured out? This year's poor stretch was not nearly as bad as last year's poor stretch. But you see some of the same things where it starts to come together a little bit toward the end. And it's like, man, where has this been? Where has some of this consistency been? Where has this effort been? And you get upset, and we all go back and forth about like, well, you shouldn't be talking about effort to this point, all those kinds of things. Nobody's really disagreeing with that. But the reality is that that's where this team really is right now. So it is a positive sign that they're getting there, and you kind of have to let the other stuff go because it's too late. Those games, the opportunity to get things to where they are now earlier in the season has come and gone, and you haven't done it, but you have started to see some good things. You started to see, a few guys really settle into what you might have hoped their roles would have been earlier in the season. And you kind of just hope for the best as you move forward. But I do agree, it's one of their more consistent stretches of play. Even this team playing consistently is not good enough to win every game. And so even during a stretch of what you'd call solid play from this team, they went 3-2. But I think that's kind of where you are with this group. And as we said tonight, even within the game was the perfect picture of what this team really is and isn't all at the same time.
Yep. All right. So looking ahead, we'll have Assembly Call Radio tomorrow night. Ryan will be here. I know it feels like forever ago that Christian Lander committed, but we will do our Christian Lander scouting report. We'll get.
It's been like a week, which is crazy, but
yeah. So I think you're in tomorrow night, right?
I think Coach was there. I did say I could come on if you want me to. So just
no, that's right. That's right. I think Coach is here, so we'll get their thoughts on this game. We'll do our Christian Lander scouting report. We'll answer your questions, so it'll be a fun episode. And then IU Wisconsin coming on Saturday. It'll be Chad and Ryan for that game. I'm out. My daughter's playing soccer now, and she's got a soccer game, so it starts for me now, Andy. I'm going to have daughter sporting event conflicts. This is a first time. 9 years into the Assembly Call.
Yep.
Now we have
enough.
two.
It'll only. Yeah, exactly. Oh, it only grows. It only gets to be more.
Yes.
That's why I'll be missing the game as well. So.
Yes. So that is the priority. But as usual, that postgame show will start after the senior speeches. So it won't start immediately following the game. It will start after the senior speeches. Chad and Ryan will be there. Hopefully Coach is not there because that means that they're still playing in the playoffs. So that's what's coming up. Remember, go to homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code assembly20. You'll get 20% off your order there. The most comfortable and unique IU apparel that you will find anywhere. Homefieldapparel.com, assembly20. All right, Andy, last call. Final thoughts on this Indiana victory.
Yeah, I'll keep this relatively short. I mean, everything that you've done through 30 games at this point is trying to put yourself in a position to play in the NCAA tournament. For this team, we said before that was a reasonable goal despite what was lost from last season and all those kinds of things. That was a reasonable goal. At this point, this team has put themselves in a position to do that. If you win at home, you win your last regular season game. To me, you lock in a bid, and that's what you're playing for. So, I guess despite all the ups and downs for this team, and as frustrating as they have been to watch at times, and as frustrating as they were to watch even at times tonight in a win, everything that they're trying to accomplish and everything that people said would result in a successful season is right in front of them. They just have to go take it, come out, play well. They played Wisconsin well a year ago, and I think they are playing some of their best basketball at this point. So it's all right there. Just go out and take it. Go win the game. Hoping for a good game for Devontae on senior night. Hopefully Danny Green has an off. He can fly in and be there for that. Don't know whether that's in the cards or not, but we'll start a GoFundMe or something that we can get him there, get him kidnapped at the very least to be brought there, even against his will. I think we're fine with whatever that is. But
I don't think it's the GoFundMe that would be the difference. I think he could probably.
That's probably true. Yeah, that's fair. Well, if we just want to, whatever you want to do. Well, maybe for the people that kidnap him is what we need the GoFundMe for. Anyway, yeah. But anyway, so no, I think that's, like I said, for all the ups and downs, it's all right there in front of you. So hopefully this team can take advantage of that opportunity, put any doubt to rest about the NCAA tournament, and go in feeling good about themselves heading into the Big Ten tournament, and we'll go from there. So we'll find that all out on Saturday. But good win tonight, good win from a bracketology perspective this team needs, and hopefully they can take advantage of the opportunity that they got in front of them on Saturday.
Yeah, I feel good coming out of this game. Indiana took care of business. They needed to. I think at times in this game, you saw some of the limitations of this team, but at other times, more importantly, you saw the growth that they've made, and you saw a guy like Joey Brunk step up and get going, and you saw what makes Trayce Jackson-Davis such a special player, even at this young of an age. You saw the impact an aggressive Al Durham can have. But, I think that really the story, as I reflect more on this game now at the end of the show, the story coming out of this game to me is Rob Phinisee. And, I saw Rick Bozich tweet at the end of the game. This was the first time all season long that Rob's had 2 straight double-figure scoring games. Now, Illinois, it was 10. Minnesota, it was 11. It's not like he's burning up the stat sheet with scoring, but you add to that 4 rebounds and 5 rebounds the last couple games, 7 total assists, only 3 turnovers in these games. And as we said, you're starting to see a guy maybe at the end of the year develop into the guy that we thought he could be, even the guy that he was at the beginning of last year. And of all the different storylines that could emerge here over the, whatever is left of this season that can really make this Indiana team dangerous and make them a team that could win a couple games in the Big Ten tournament, and they can go win a couple games maybe in the NCAA tournament, is having that guy at the top of the offense and the top of the defense play like we've seen him play in spurts, but never consistently. And if Rob can become that guy, he really changes, I think, what this team is capable of and how consistent they can be. So really important that he's played 29 and 30 minutes the last couple games. Really important also that they've been productive, aggressive minutes on both ends of the court. And hopefully that's something that continues, because it would be massive for this team down the stretch. All right, that is going to do it for us on this edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. And again, don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to longtime listener Bob Thompson, who produces a lot of the music that you hear on the show. And thank you for listening. We will be back tomorrow night to talk IU Hoops again with you on Assembly Call Radio. Until then.
Take it from me, Robert Johnson. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
I don't like carrots.
Coach still does not like carrots.
No,
all right. Well, good stuff, man.
Hey,
that is we needed that win. It's an exhale type win, We had to get that one and we got it.
Yep.
So I am.
Yep. Wisconsin they were tight with Northwestern for a little while, but they're starting to pull away now, it looks like.
You know, one thing I'm disappointed about, like we've been with the chat mob for a long time. I don't know, ever since we started doing these shows on YouTube. I feel like we try to do a good job of leading, and I still see people citing Joe Lunardi in the chat. And I get it. You know, he's got the bracketology bully pulpit of ESPN. But someday there will be no more citing of Joe Lunardi. When you have Andy Bottoms and Delphi Bracketology, and now new bracketologist Mike DeCourcy. Although, to be fair, we don't know Mike's results yet. We'll have to see them. But you have so many assembly call-related bracketologists to pay attention to. I don't ever want to see the name Lunardi in our chat again. Just saying. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that's fair. I will, and I said this before, that when I was doing the bracketology podcast a few years ago, like reached out to him, and that position was on for probably as long as anybody, and gave me a ton of time. Was super nice. So
yeah,
definitely a very. But
no,
yeah,
it's a good point.
Struggle. I do not like how he has IU below the teams. He has them below as the first, in the first four. That just, and I don't know what he'll have them at after winning tonight, but it just makes no sense to me whatsoever.
No, I mean, he did
if
a
you really
lot.
Stack up their resume to other teams that are around them in there, it just doesn't make sense at all.
He did a lot for bracketology and bracketologists. You know, there's no question about it. He does seem like a good guy. His projections just aren't the ones I would cite. That's all.
That is a fair point.
If you're going to go outside of assembly call, okay, I think we've had this question before, but Bracketville, Bracket Guy Dave.
Yeah, he's really good. Bracket Guy Dave on Twitter. He has him as what did he have him at today? I think he has him as a 9 coming in today.
Yeah, Galen does brackets. There's another assembly call related bracketologist you can go to.
Yeah. So Bracketville, he had them at the 35th overall seed today, so 9, pretty safely. So
good.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see the first four stuff. I think that could have been a legitimate question had they lost tonight. But we'll see. But I would say you beat Wisconsin on Saturday, you exhale, you're definitely in good shape.
What is your connection's about to die? So this is probably the last question.
Yeah, apparently it seems to be. It just held out just long enough. So
let's say a reasonable ceiling for what Indiana could do from here on out is beat Wisconsin, and then you're probably going to be in that Wednesday game. So you win the Wednesday game, and let's say you win your Thursday game. That seems like a reasonable path this team could take. Anything beyond that is gravy. We'll take it. But how high could Indiana's seed go if they did that? Like, could they get to a 7 if they did that, or is that too far? I know it matters what happens around.
I guess yeah. I mean, I feel like this year I preface everything with that, but gut reaction. I mean, if they made it as a 7, like they would probably creep on to the 7 line as the very last one. That feels like a little bit of a stretch, but I suppose it's possible. That would give them 2 more neutral court wins. You'd have to assume that whatever you get in the Big Ten tournament would be a quad 1 win. Yeah, you might be able to do that if things fell your way. I don't think higher than a 7 in that scenario, maybe any scenario, quite honestly. But that's probably as good as you could hope for there, dependent upon who you played, how you played, all those kinds of things. But I think you could, it's one of those things where I don't know. There's some people who I know have responded to comments and like, I'd rather play in the 7-10 game because then you get one of the 2 seeds potentially versus have to face a 1 in the second round if you win an 8-9 game. I don't really know what's better or worse. It's all dependent upon matchups at that point.
Let's just get in. It's been 3 years. I just want to seed. I want to get in, nice. And then for us to be able to do a post-selection Sunday show, which we haven't been able to do in a while. So let's get back to that normal routine. I want this to feel normal again, and normal is making the NCAA tournament. So
yeah, I'm with you.
Let's get in. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. We will talk to you guys tomorrow night for Assembly Call Radio. Adios.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. See you, man.